Good morning, Shui.
Good morning, Susan.
Akash and E is still in a different meeting, so I expect to wait a couple of minutes for everybody to join. Good morning, Jing Chang.
Sure. And I think some like Audi and others may in the KubeCon North America. So yeah.
Yeah, probably. Okay. I see CNCF Aura's project entering the room. Probably Feynman. Hello, Louise. Hello, Akash. And
Hello.
Aura's project.
Hello.
Let me move my windows around for a little bit.
I believe Bin mentioned he was not going to be able to make it today.
Yes.
And Yi mentioned he was only able to make it on the second half.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of agenda today, so it might end before the second half starts, but we'll see. So let me share my screen. I see Feynman joining as himself. Share screen. Share the process. Cool. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Thanks. Just going through our PRs quickly. I think we were able to merge some PRs this week. Now we still have the oh gosh, is this the third comment? Were you able to reach out? Were you able to get a response from the contributor?
No, I tagged him early this week and no response. So I've added the stale tag, and then if no response by end of week, I think we can just close it.
Sounds good. Thank you. And the vulnerability report scanner, are we proceeding with implementing the specific vulnerability?
Yes.
Yeah,
I believe so. Yep.
Cool. So that one's still in progress. Jun Cheng's PR 1150 update verifier reference. Jun Cheng, are you blocked on this one at all?
I already have the notation plugin already and parsed to CLI test, and currently I'm working on other verifiers. Once I get the rest few customized verifiers done, the PR will be ready.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
And Bin have a active PR on wrapping notation Go error. Yep, so addressing feedback from E, that plugin init error didn't include nested error from notation Go. Got it. Akash, you've already reviewed it. And is this one ready to merge?
Yeah, it looks good to me. It's just a one-line change.
Cool. I'll go ahead and merge it then, before it becomes out of date for some reason. Okay, so that one's merged. Now going over to our web.
Sorry. So
Hi,
that
Feynman.
I have a small suggestion. So I have seen there are a few PRs that doesn't have a matched issues that elaborate on the problems or the enhancement or any improvements that we make, that we want to make. So I'm thinking we should have at least a quite simple description on the issue and associate the issue with PRs, so users or any other can quickly understand what does this PR face, which problems, and they will know the value of this PR and which issues that we resolved when we write when we write release notes or when we write blog posts for the release. It will be easier for us to reach out.
Yeah, so some of these PRs that's in draft mode, they don't have very detailed descriptions, but I think most of our PRs with the ones that's merged, once it's out of draft mode, they should have descriptions and also associations to the issue. But yes, I do agree with you. Some of the PRs, we don't have a issue ID that's associated. And yeah, I think in our template, we do say like, please make sure to include the issue that's being fixed. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. Is there a way to enforce it like automatically?
Maybe we can update the PR template. I have seen we have a template like what this PR, why we need it. I'm looking at this template and see whether we have a question that which issue that this PR resolves. I'm thinking we can
add
so
this
question
be,
to the PR template if we don't have.
Our default template.
We
like,
have.
Yeah, this is created
yeah.
from the default template, but because it's in the draft state, that's why it's not yet populated.
Yeah, we have that issue. We have that question in the second question.
Yes. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. If we don't see the description, we'll definitely leave a comment. Yeah, thanks for the feedback. Trying to see our PR list. Feynman, your PR number 26, is this ready for another round of review?
Yeah, I think so. I think we will need Sajay and Luis to take a final look since they have a few comments left. And I have resolved all of those comments.
Yep, I will take a look, Feynman.
Thanks.
Thank you, Luis. Akash, I've created this issue, sorry, PR 31 on the web is related to the notation certificate array update in the Ratify repository. We had a brief discussion the other day to merge this after the chart gets released. So should I tag it in a way?
Yeah, should we just put the do not merge tag on it?
Yeah. Sounds good. Is it a manual tag? Do you just type do not merge? Is that what?
Oh no, it should, at least on the other repository, it's a label.
Okay, I've not done this before, so okay, let me try this out. So I guess I have to click into the PR, and then there's like labels right here, documentation.
Yeah, it may not exist, so you can add one, like a new one.
Okay, is there a add option here? Like there's an edit label. Oh, what did it do? Okay, new label, do not merge. Do label. Go back. Do not merge. Going back to the PR list to make sure it's labeled correctly. Okay, looks good. So we'll remember to merge this once we release the new chart in December.
Sure, sounds good.
This is
Um,
for Ratify Helm chart v1.1, right? This change, the cert notation set array change.
Yes. Okay, looking at our agenda, we don't have anything on the list right now, but Akash, a few days ago, you did create like a bunch of issues for cosine, and there was also another discussion about dynamic plugin, right? So I think some of them may be interesting to discuss. Do you want to go through them?
Sure. Before we leave the Ratify web repo, there's actually an issue that I filed on there.
Oh, okay.
Ran into this when I was helping Toddy with a QCon. So yeah, the first one, the Azure guide for Azure policy add-on, that one actually doesn't work. So basically this guide, this portion of the guide is if you have your Azure policy add-on already installed on your AKS cluster, but you aren't using the image integrity feature. So you still need to install Ratify manually. So it looks like AKS Azure policy add-on doesn't support the assign CRD, which is a resource by Gatekeeper, and that's the resource responsible for doing the tag to digest mutation. And that template exists in our published Helm chart. So if you try to actually install Ratify using our published Helm chart, it actually doesn't work. And even if you try to locally do it with your local Helm chart, you need to remember to remove that template and then use that after you've deleted it. So I don't know what the best way to do that is. Either we provide guidance saying that, hey, make sure to remove this template, or somehow publish some other chart as like an OCI artifact in our GHCR, and then say, hey, you could use this instead. But maybe in terms of managing that dev Helm chart, it might get tricky. So maybe we just say, hey, you need to manually go and delete the assigned template if you want it to work. But any thoughts on that?
It definitely sounds like the cheapest way, like provide the manual workaround to the documentation so the customer can at least get unblocked.
Yeah. Of course, the best case scenario is if, just use the AKS image integrity feature directly. But, if they have some requirements or they want to use some newer version of Ratify with it or something, then this guide should still be updated. So.
Yeah. Is the other option, like if we had a values flag in the chart that says, oh, support assigned custom resource or not, like if it's disabled, don't go this route, like have an if statement somehow.
Yeah, that might work. We could, because I think we already have the enable mutation flag, so we could maybe wrap the resources around that, so we won't even bother applying the provider. But
sorry, I have some giant bus that's passing. Sorry for the background noise, but Akash, I didn't hear the last part of the sentence. I heard about mutation tag value.
Yeah,
so we could do something similar to that.
We could try to see if that'll work. We need to experiment to see.
Yeah, it's just another option. But for now, we can also just add a manual step.
Yep.
Yeah, Akash and Susan, I remember I encountered this issue either when I tested the AKS image integrity and Ratify. So I think this issue could be reproduced when users already enabled AKS image integrity, and then they manually install the Ratify with the Helm chart. So there will be there could be conflicts with the built-in Azure Azure policy add-on and the built-in policies with the manually Ratify and the Gatekeeper, right?
Yes, yeah, that's definitely possible, but I think guidance on the AKS side is that that's just not supported. Don't do that. And then maybe we also add that in our documentation that if you try to install Ratify with the image integrity add-on already installed, things may not work.
Yeah, I'm thinking how users will reproduce or encounter this issue. And you know, the guide here, the Ratify on Azure guide, I think this is not valuable after the AKS image integrity feature is public preview, right? This guide is for the users who want to set up Ratify on Azure before we have AKS image integrity. So I'm thinking we should revise the guide to be not conflict with the AKS image integrity. So for users who wanna use Ratify on Azure, they may need to consider the managed AKS image integrity feature. But for the guide, for this guide, I think we will need to whatever create a workaround or tell users how can they avoid the conflicts. I think we should assume users do not want enable the AKS image integrity if they set up Ratify with the Helm chart manually.
Yeah, that makes sense. We could even just remove this section of it, saying that if you want to use Ratify on AKS in a managed way at all with Azure policy, go to the Azure docs and follow the recommended setup.
Yeah, I think not so many users may enable the AKS image integrity and Ratify and install Ratify Helm chart at the same time, since this is not a real use case. But technically, I think they have conflicts in the Gatekeeper custom resource. I think what we can do is to revise the Ratify on Azure guide and point users to AKS image integrity if they want to run Ratify on Azure. Otherwise, if they want to on-premise or install Ratify on an Azure VM, I think we can update this guide and assume users do not enable the AKS image integrity. I think we can provide two options, one for managed feature and another one for set up from scratch. And we can also state that there will be conflicts if they start two options at the same time.
Sounds good. So, Feynman, would you be able to summarize it and in the issue, and then we'll make the updates?
Yeah, I can summarize on the issue, and I was seeking for help from our technical writer and see if they could help us to update related docs. I think we need at least as AKS image integrity related information or guides here, at least point to the image integrity official guide. I think currently users may not be aware of image integrity if they see the existing documentation, right?
Yeah, exactly. They'll come here and say, oh, I can deploy Ratify on AKS and here's how, but they don't see the managed way. It's not obvious. Yeah. we need to provide more guidance here. I agree. It has a link to verify if AKS cluster already have policy add-on enabled. Learn more. It's we do have a link to Azure. Cool. Okay, thank you, Feynman. So there is another issue on the repo. Support search on the website. So Feynman, is this something we should consider this milestone?
Yeah, I think we will need to add the built-in website search feature for Ratify website, so that users can search content by any keywords. There's a free tool, Algolia, that we can leverage to enable the content search on the website. And I see there's a
will you be able to provide this contributor with some information on how to get started?
Yeah, sure.
He is eager to contribute to the project. I love it.
That's a good signal. I will follow up and reply to this contributor.
Thank you, Feynman. Okay, back to the Ratify issues. So Akash, we did run through these issues in the triage meeting earlier in this week. And we thought this one, it's interesting to talk about improve notation verifier plugin manager experience.
Sure.
And specifically, like, would it benefit like anyone who's looking to implement notation, their own notation plugin? Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, exactly. So, so currently, when our notation verifier does support bring your own notation plugin. So these are the plugins that, for example, AWS, during their verification flow, they also require a plugin. I'm not exactly sure what exactly it does, but they require that the Ratify verifier for notation have access to this plugin when you create the notation verifier under the hood using Notation Go. So the way it currently is done is it leverages the source download functionality of the verifier plugin. So you can specify a registry reference, and then it'll go and download the artifact from the registry, and then basically mount the contents into the plugins directory where other external plugins are kept. So in order to get the actual notation plugin into that directory so that the notation plugin manager can pick it up, they define a separate verifier. So if you click on that link, Susan. And scroll down just a bit. Yeah. So they define this, just actually, if you scroll back up a little bit. Yeah, there. So the first block of text, they define a new AWS Signer plugin. And this Signer plugin does nothing other than specify the source artifact to download from. And then if you look at even the artifact types, it's not really a valid artifact type you can think of. It's kind of a placeholder value because this verifier doesn't actually get run apart from on installation in the cluster. It downloads the source artifact and places that binary in the correct directory so that the actual notation verifier, which is the block below, can find that binary and then run that plugin on verification. So basically a better experience over creating this no-op verifier would be to kind of embed the source artifact capability into the notation verifier as well. So you can just leverage the common artifact download functionality that we have in our common package, and then implement it inside the notation verifier and add a new specification configuration field inside the notation verifier. So you can just say, hey, I have some plugins, here's the source of these plugins, rather than creating this no-op verifier. So that's basically the recommended, well, my recommended solution to this. And I think we had another user on Slack who was also trying to create a notation plugin. AWS does this, and then we might also, maybe in the future, it would help others doing this.
Question, Akash, is it common for people to use different notation plugin? What is the different verification they do in their plugin? Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Shui knows.
Pardon?
Susan, do you want to ask your question one more time?
Oh, yes. So Shui, we're seeing requirements that like the AWS scenario where they are implementing their own notation plugin. I'm just curious, is this like a common requirement? So if it's very common that everyone is doing slightly different notation verification, then we don't want them to introduce or need to go through this whole process of defining a new verifier. This common scenario, and I'm just curious, why would they define their own notation plugin?
Yeah, it depends how they sign the signatures. So as you can see, for Azure Key Vault signer, it's just provide a very basic, that's a primitive signature signing service. So in that case, we don't need a verifier plugin to verify the signatures. And I think that's the common case. But some advanced plugins like the AWS signers, they just they don't just sign the primitive signatures. They also sign the entire envelope in their customized form. So that's why they need a customized verifier to verify those envelopes. I don't think it's a common pattern, but it's possible.
Yeah, thank you. And Feynman, do you think, so we're probably not going to have additional time for this milestone, but is this something that we should consider for 1.2? Do you think it meets the bar? Or is it like future versus 1.2? Well, where should we put this item right now? How do you prioritize?
I think it depends on how the benefits that this feature will bring to the users. So what I'm understanding is that it will allow users no longer need to download the plugin from the remote source, right? Can't we write a hard address, source address in the YAML file? Ratify will need to download the AWS Signer plugin from a remote source. If we have the plugin embedded with the notation verifier plugin in Ratify, users will no longer need to download this plugin from remote source, and it will be convenient if users use Ratify in air-gapped environment. Is that correct? And maybe there may be a few performance enhancement if we don't need users to download the plugin from external source.
Akash, just to confirm, they still need to download, but it's just a matter of like not needing to define a new verifier.
Yes, so they have to download, but we could also support path-based. So you could have built your image with the plugin at a certain path, and you just specify the path.
Sorry, Akash, could you rephrase your point?
So right now, Ratify actually is in charge of downloading the binary from source that you specify. Now, if you want to avoid downloading, you could just specify a file path instead on the container that we can find the binary at. And then the user can choose to either mount the binary separately, or they've already pre-packaged the binary when they built the Ratify image, different ways they could do it. So if we want to avoid only providing the source URL where we download from, we could also make it, we could add support for a file path for the notation plugin binary.
Okay, so is this enhancement only benefits the AWS Signer plugin, or is this a general design principle that fits every plugin, every Ratify plugin, I mean?
So we don't have support, and Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have support for a generic path that you can pass in for the source that Ratify should go look for, right? We set the directory where the plugins are going to be, and we assume that all the plugins are going to exist in that directory. We don't separate it by per plugin base. So we don't have this concept of a path field per verifier that you can specify currently. So introducing the path for just the notation piece would benefit basically anyone who's using a notation plugin. So AWS or Ratify are the current ones now, but we could even look into expanding that to be for any verifier or store plugin that you want to use. But we just haven't had there hasn't been an ask for path-based yet. So if we have a concrete ask, I guess, then maybe we can look into it, but.
Yeah, I do see the major benefits of this enhancement. I would like to see if there is real customer request or user request on this kind of enhancement.
Yep.
But I do agree that this is a nice to have feature, and it will eliminate the setup experience, eliminate the setup cost for users. Ratify will help users to download the plugin from source without manually specify the address, right? I think we can mark it as future at this moment, since we have very limited bandwidth on for bring new features to V1.1.
Cool. Sounds good.
If this feature is not a big change, we can add a good first issue in case any users or contributors from AWS ecosystem they can take it up.
Yep, sounds good. And also there is a way to do it. It's just a little bit inconvenient, right, Akash? Like you can still build it in your verifier.
Yeah, it took, I had to like go back and forth with the user on Slack for him to understand, okay, what is going on here? And that's totally fair. It's kind of confusing why do I need another verifier for my notation plugin? So.
Yeah. I see E entering the room. So that's, I thought this one is the most interesting to discuss. From the list, Akash, do you think there's anything that we should, anything else like cosine related that we should discuss? Look at the issues list.
No, there's nothing specific. You could just go to the Epic one. I just decided to list all of the cosine related improvements that we should consider whenever we prioritize revamping the cosine verifier. There's definitely some areas we need to improve on. The documentation, for one, is fairly non-existent. There are not really guides for it. It's very confusing, and some of it is out of date, and that's what we actually found when I was helping the user on Slack. The other one is obviously the public key support. How do we configure multiple of those? And then the other one that I added was configuring a cosign with more options. Right now, it's fairly limited in what you can do. You can specify kind of your record URL, or you can specify your key path for keyed scenarios. But there's a lot more options that other projects, as well as cosign itself, allows for, like specifying identities, and do you want to do transparency log verification, things like that, those flags. We don't have any of that built in to the cosign verifier. So
Yeah. And would you agree with are we seeing more and more customer trying to compare Ratify against some other like kernel with the cosign verification requirement?
I don't know about more and more, but definitely interesting to see though. I've been seeing a few asks, at least on Slack, where they're asking, okay, what about cosign? How does that work? And then the one user did the direct comparison that we were discussing. So
yeah, so at the moment, it's triaged into the future milestone. So Feynman E, as you hear, requirements on cosign, and once we want to invest more into cosign, we can pick this up.
Yes, I think currently it is okay to put to feature, but based on the current information I collected, we can firstly focus whether any gap or we need to improve experience on the keyed signature, and also how to configure multiple keys. I think these two other are most important for now. I mean, speaking of cosign, these two are most important. Then we can consider other scenarios, key scenarios, and other things.
Yep, sounds good. That's everything on our agenda. But if we have time, I would also want to talk about, there's some offline discussions on like the VEX document, the SBOM verification scenario, and the talk about the end-to-end policy where customers potentially don't need to specify the verifiers. E, do you want to? You have several documents. You have the HackMD spec, and then the presentation slide where me and Akash added some comments. Do you want to use this time to go through some of the comments?
Yes, I also want to talk about the some current behavior. I saw your comments.
Yeah.
So
sure. Would you like to share screen?
Let me check whether it is okay. I can share that. Let me check. Okay, I think I can share it. Let me share the screen.
Sure. Let me make you the host, and we can go through the current behavior.
Okay, just a second. I find the right window. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So I saw Susan has one comment on this page, and Susan, you mentioned that the user can also configure this config policy, right? This
Yes.
YAML file. but I'm not sure whether, user know how to do that or how to say, because currently I saw the logic is very simple, right? It's just to check whether all the verifiers succeed. If yes, then the overall verifications succeed. So I think the main thing I want to show here is we have some logic or some criteria that defines how we can think about the verification is successful. That are some parameters that many user need to configure for each verifier, right? For example, for notation verifier, we have some parameters like the trust store, trust identity, something like that. But that is for each verifier, right? For cosign, we could have a similar, but it is on the verifier side. For the currently the policy side is actually has a very simple logic.
Yeah, a policy would be like, I want to make sure all image have signatures. It's like a very, it's not specific to an instance of verification, but more like from a high level, anything that's deployed on my cluster, I want to make sure these verification was successful.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's configurable. So we have a public documentation on the core concept. So verifier is a core component where it's very flexible that user can bring their own verifier and apply that to their cluster. And then as policy, it's also a CR that we have examples on how do you configure a all requirement. We specifically, by default, turned on the like all signatures must be validated to be very, very strict about like, make sure you know what you're deploying. But I've also seen some recent discussions on the Slack channel. I think Akashi were on that thread where like the user had 2 different signatures and only one succeeded. And they had a little bit of trouble to debug, oh, why did this fail? It was because our default policy is so strict that they needed to remove the invalid signature.
Yeah.
But yes, that is the correct status. Yes.
Yeah.
The
and
current
actually the
default.
Yeah. Yes.
It's very strict.
Yeah, it's very strict and also yeah, and the simple logic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just wanting to make
yeah.
a clarification that it is configurable and we do have documentation on how to configure it.
Okay.
And the assumption with the current behavior of Ratify is like the customer will need to configure the policy, they will need to configure the verifiers. We are just providing like a default to get started.
Yes. For that we can, I think I have a slide later to discuss, but for this slides, your comments, I think I agree with you. A user can configure vulnerability, the verifiers, and also can configure this configure policy. Yep. Then I think this one, maybe I use the wrong, maybe I'm wrong for this. But my point is that from Ratify point of view, I don't see we provided this regular policy so that the user can apply on Gatekeeper. This is my point. So maybe for some cloud provider, they develop some regular policy on the Gatekeeper side. So then this pass-through mode work. But from open source Ratify point of view, it seems we don't provide this. So how can user use Gatekeeper past the Ratify to make it work?
So we actually do provide this.
If you don't write this, because we need to write this, right?
Yeah, so we actually do provide it. We provide it in our
Okay,
source code
so,
repo under the
to me
library.
or pointing.
Sorry,
Okay.
I think I don't know if it's on my side, but I think you're breaking up.
Breaking up a little bit, yeah. Yi, can you repeat the question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, this better now.
Yeah, it seems my network is not stable. So my question is, maybe Akash, you can share the link for this.
Yes.
When in this pass-through mode, I don't find it in the document. I'm not sure we should add it, or I also missed this information in the document. So
Yes, no, it's not in the documents, and yeah, we might want to consider moving it to the website as well. It's in the Ratify repository. It's a folder called library. I'm just gonna paste it in the chat.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then I will try it. So maybe if documentation, we only mentioned for the Ratify Rego, we have these parameters, right? But we definitely need another Rego policy on the gatekeeper side, the constraint template side, right? To
Yes.
make it work.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's unfortunately there's no documentation on which one to use in which scenario apart from the title of the folder. So there's gaps there. It's also I think we should move it to the website like you're talking about, so it's easier for people to find it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. But for this statement, I will change it. It's not right. Okay. For this page, so I will change this pass-through mode doesn't work. It actually work. Okay. So the question is, the point here is that since Ratify as a external data provider, right? We send the data to gatekeeper. So actually the data we send to the gatekeeper is the result of each verifier. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is we can discuss. So we send the result of each verifier report to the gatekeeper if in the pass-through mode, right? And the gatekeeper can decide based on the report results, right? And currently, we have a very strict policy that all the verifiers report should pass. Then overall, this policy succeeds, right? This is current behavior. Of course, user can customize this policy, the overall policy, but it's a bit difficult for user to do that because this is not. I think this is also related to the second one because currently it is not on the. I mean, from user point of view, they want to have some high level or the policy that's including different verifiers. But currently our granularity is on the verifiers. For example, for vulnerability reports, in order to enforce this policy, I want to make sure the signature is okay and also some criteria in the documents, right? Maybe I can show this page. And also, we may also need to check some other WAX documents. This is also another verifier. But this together works for vulnerability policy, right? But from user point of view, at least from the regular policy point of view, it just checks the results. There is no I mean, there's no information related to this vulnerability report. How these 3 verifier reports works for vulnerability report, because all the reports are sent to this to the gatekeeper, right? So maybe some reports are not related to vulnerability, but still goes to this gatekeeper.
Yes, yeah, that's true. And the way currently we get around that is that you have to write your rego policy to be able to understand that I need to parse through the reports, and I need to look for vulnerability report, for example, I need to look for all the reports that have an artifact of type serif, or the verifier name is vulnerability report verifier. And then after I found those reports, then for each one of those reports, I can take a look at the nested reports that are attached to it. And nested reports will contain the verification reports of verifiers that are run on that particular artifact. So for a signature, you would have a signature report in the nested report result. So the rego policy is written in a way where it can decipher this large report list of reports, walk them correctly, understand which ones need to filter out, and then only evaluate the ones that are necessary for that particular scenario. So that's kind of the assumption right now.
Yeah, so but the difficult part is that the user needs to write this rego policy, right? It is not by default provided to user.
Yes, so
Yeah, but
so
once we have the verifiers, we can provide sample policies.
Will this sample policy be the default one that we will ship? I mean, after installation of Ratify and the gatekeeper, this will by default work. The user
Yes.
just needed to configure these different parameters.
Yes, so that's how our Ratify default chart works. So at the moment, for example, we have the SBOM verifier and the license checker, but they're not wired up in the chart because they were like experimental verifiers and kind of like demos and samples. But once we're saying we are providing like a stable version of the vulnerability verifier, we will wire it in the chart so that the verifier CR is created on install of Ratify. The open source customer would configure the Ratify install through the Helm chart values to say like, I want to enable vulnerability scanning. And we will provide all the internal wiring that's needed, the verifier, the policy, out of the box. I think that is something we will look into do. Are we in line here, Akash?
Yeah, I think that makes sense from an installation point of view, but I think Yi is also concerned about after install, how does the user actually update these pieces of information? And to address that, yeah, the user needs to be aware of the verifier concept and then understand that you have a vulnerability report custom resource that you've installed. And then on the vulnerability report custom resource, that is where you would actually edit the different fields according to what you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to blacklist certain CVEs or
yeah,
adjust
and it doesn't, sorry, Akash, just to clarify, like, for example, I was the customer. If I just want to update the license information or the vulnerability, like I used to only care about SEV3s, now I only, I don't usually care about SEV3s, I only care about SEV2s before. Now I will care about SEV3s. So I just update the verifier.
Yes.
Right? I don't need to go update the policy. There's only actually one update.
Yes, that in that scenario, yes, but
Yeah.
I guess we can leave it at that. There's different scenarios where if you need to, like for signature verification scenarios, if I want to enforce that a specific certificate was used in the verification, that level of granularity we cannot do at just updating the verifier for vulnerability report. You need to do some extra policy adjustments to account for that. But
yeah, it
if we
depends
take
on the
that
change.
yeah, it depends on the change, exactly.
Yeah. Because we have broken our component into more modular, like there's the verifier, and then there is like verifiers are specific to what is the trust store that I'm using with the certificates. And then there's policy, like overall policy, but that's not specific to a single verification. So it depends on where the change is. You could just edit the policy, you could just edit the verifier, or in some advanced cases, you need to modify both.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Sorry, we couldn't hear you before, but now we can.
Yeah, my network is quite unstable. Sorry about that.
But
yeah,
yes, back to our
yeah.
original question. The customer will configure the values once they'll say, I want a vulnerability scanner, like enable the vulnerability scanner. And then they'll configure like the severities that they care about, and then in the values file, and then they're good to go. And if it's a CLI, we would wire up the config JSON, and then because CLI it's a single verification, all the configuration is actually in one place, and the CLI experience should also be quite straightforward.
Yeah, I think for if some policy is very simple, that's basically it how to say, maybe equals to the verifier report. I mean, if the verifier succeeds, then the policy basically succeeds. I think in this case, for example, for when we verify the signature, right? If the verifier succeeds, I think from the policy overall, it succeeds. I think for this simple policy, it is okay. But we could have some complex policies. For example, how to support, for example, multiple signatures. User may need to specify from certain certificates, then it is success, but for other scenarios, it is not. And also, I also have this page related to the scope, because currently all the policy applied to all the images, right? But there could be some images signed by cosign, some images signed by notation, some images signed by both cosign and notation, and some images may contain vulnerability reports, some are not. So these are different, but currently we only support one big scope. The policy applies to all the images. Basically, we only have one policy file. That file applies to all the images. How can we differentiate it?
Akashi had a comment there. Do you want to talk about the artifact type?
I'm still a little bit confused about the scenario you're talking about, Yi. So the thing is, if you have an image, let's say I have a policy that says that I want to make sure that if there is a notation signature, that it verifies to true. Then that policy would only be, the verifier for notation would only be run on images that have an actual notation signature on it. Because the way verifiers are executed are basically the Ratify executor checks to see that is this artifact that I came across, does it have a matching verifier with an artifact type that matches a verifier that's configured. So only then will it actually run it. So even if you have images that have only one or the other or both, it'll generate reports accordingly, according to if that actual verifier exists, or if that artifact of that verifier type exists. So when you mean, okay, you only have one high level policy, what would be the granularity that you're looking for that couldn't be captured at the high level? Maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, so maybe as you explained, so if image didn't have a cosign signature, so that the cosign verifier will not report anything, right? It will not be a failure, right? Because how can you make sure this image should have a cosign signature, but it didn't have, and it should report a failure?
So that would be equivalent to your policy of all images must have a cosign signature?
But that means some images they don't have cosign signatures. So I mean, the image could different repository, they could have a different policies. Some repository could be they must have cosign signatures. Some group of images they must have a notation signatures. Some may have both. So currently, our policy apply to all the images, right? So if you have the policy that all the that the image should have a cosign signatures, then for those images only have a notation signatures, it will fail.
Yes, okay, I see what you're saying. So let's say you took a more narrow scope saying images maybe from GHCR must be signed by cosign, or even at the repo level like you're talking about.
Yeah, because currently we cannot differentiate that. This is cause some scenarios, like I mentioned, we cannot just simply say we should have cosign signatures because some images have notary project signatures. It's different.
So if I was the cluster admin, I can specify something like the image must have a signature, whether it's cosign or notary, right, Akash? Can we implement the regular policy? It can. Other customers able to implement policy that says notation or cosign?
Yeah, so notation or cosign works, or even you can be more granular because our report per signature will tell you what was the subject that it verified. So you could say, hey, for this repository, wildcard prefix, I want to make sure that I apply, I want to guarantee that there are cosign signatures from here. And for this repository, I want to make sure that there's notation. So as long as the information is there, you can, because it's Rego and it's so flexible, you can basically write any policy you want. However, that doesn't mean it's going to be simple policy. It'll likely be very complicated, but nonetheless, it is possible.
Yeah, so at a very broad, not very broad scope, because the policy is tied into namespace, right? So I can say the test namespace must have a. So go ahead.
Yeah, it may not be the namespace multi-tenancy case. It's just be different images have different criteria. So I mean, I understand that Ratify has the flexibility because we have a different verifiers, right? We can make any combination we need, and we can write a policy accordingly. But I think for normal user, we should provide some kind of I call it building policies. So with that policies, there are some common issue that we solved for our users. For example, deny images not signed, or images should have a vulnerability. We should provide some common policies, and this policy should be applied to a scoped images, or by default all the images. So currently we don't have that. But we have the flexibility. We can ask a user to do that, but it's difficult, especially we are using this regular policy. So I'm expecting that we can have some building policies with some common scenarios, but we also have this flexibility that the user can introduce new verifiers and build their own policies. That's my point.
Yeah. So
I
we
see.
have like the goal for Ratify is to have the framework of integrating different verification requirements, right? And we can provide some samples, but we also don't want to be responsible for the author of all the different combinations. Like, I think if the user have a requirement, a specific requirement, they can add to our library of samples or also like implement their own. And specifically in the beginning, we didn't want to be the policy engine that implemented all different variations of like policy check, which is why we said, okay, let's support regular policy engine, so then the customer can provide all their custom logic. So we don't have to implement our config policy that support different types of verification requirements. So what I'm trying to say is, in the beginning, we prioritized flexibility for sure. Like, we wanted to our key concepts were to expose the verifiers, so we provide the building blocks. And if you have a specific verification scenario, the customer is likely to implement it themselves. And we will provide some default templates, but we need to hear from the user, like what are the common requirements? And we can definitely provide the default regular policy to wire up to our default Helm chart. But we're probably not going to implement it as a new kind of CR, because later in the slide I mentioned, like, we cannot have the same information captured in two CRs, because then there's a chance that they can override each other, and we're not supposed to modify the CRs. It'll lead to a very confused workflow. And I also mentioned in the policy, Azure policy route, since there is a policy and the verifiers are derived from the policy, the customers are disallowed from then interacting with the verifiers themselves.
Okay, so currently, from user point of view, they need to config verifiers. They also need to config the policy part, right, to have their own logic.
Yeah, you mentioned the scenario where we would like a policy specific to a specific image. Is that doable today, Akash? Like, if we...
Yeah, it's possible. It's messy, but it's possible.
Yeah, but by default, the policy is at the namespace level. We're saying, like, everything deployed to this namespace must, example, like, have SBOMs, have signatures. It's not specific to a specific image.
But the images, I mean, a group of images should be a common scenarios. The namespace, the namespace is still a bit broad.
Could we have examples where, like, why would different image have different requirements? Can we have some customer scenario?
for example, for the cosine and the notary projects, they are different. They definitely from different signed by different parties, right?
Yeah.
So maybe for customers who use notation tool, they signed with notation and pushed to the registry. Some customers they use cosine and they sign these images pull to the registry, and from cluster point of view they pull these images, right? And these images could also contain different metadata. For example, for cosine, maybe there are also other attestations. So these images are different, so it should have a different policies. But currently we check all the verifiers, but the policy are applied to different images, right? The logic
Yeah,
is
got
different.
it. Yeah, so like let's say I use notation and cosine to sign my images, and I'm the cluster admin. If I knew ahead of time which image must be validated, cosine, which image must be validated. So today it's, as Akash was saying, maybe complicated, but I can configure specific policies in the Rego. Image A, make sure this one, I get a notation verifier report and make sure that's success.
Yeah, so sorry. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's quite unstable, my side. So I think we can I mean, from a verifier point of view, I understand. But as I said, so different verifiers could serve for different purpose. So that's why in this slide, I have a kind of a policy configuration. I want to say, for example, this kind of verifiers, they are applies to these images. So although in this policy configuration, in this slide, I mean, I didn't, I mean, it will not specifically set verifiers. It could be use the artifact tab, right? So it could be certain artifact tab with specific configurations, and this applies to a group of images. Because from verifier point of view, we don't have this level for the images, right? We just have the information for the verifier for the artifact type. We don't have the information for images. So there should be a level of information. Although we can do it in the Rego policy, but it could be very complex. It could be a very large Rego policy.
Yeah. Akash, earlier we were thinking about, say, like regex matching. Is that also to address this requirement? Not exactly.
No, because the regex matching was specific for the auth provider stuff. This you're talking about actually at the executor level, you need to have regex matching, where you'd apply you'd have to apply which verifier you want, or manually override not running a specific verifier, depending on the wildcard support or whatever expression you provide on top of the subject image that you're verifying. We don't have that level of granularity, and we don't have that. Kind of breaks the concept of Ratify. That the premise of Ratify doesn't apply anymore. So I think it's possible to do this via Rego. The question is whether we're going to expose this to the user and how much. I think the biggest question is, what can we expect from the user? Can we expect that they will write their own Rego, or they may just override some default values on top and not touch the rest of the Rego, and that's totally acceptable? Or is it that they should not even have to even look at the Rego and should be able to use a unified policy configuration like you're talking about? Because
I think ideally, we have two kind of user. One is the normal user. They don't know Rego, so they just know, as I said in this slide, they just learn from our document that Ratify support this kind of verification. So they just do the configuration, then it works for them. And maybe for some advanced users, they develop even new verifiers, and they can write a policy, a Rego policy, to combine different building verifiers and also new verifiers they introduced. But I think the majority is the common user. They just want to do some configuration, then it works.
Yeah, I see that, and definitely there's a lot more steps if we do it the current way. But even if we do implement a policy configuration that unifies all of these things, under the hood, it's doing the exact same thing as what a user would be doing today. Instead of it would map to, okay, for this scenario, I'm gonna just apply this templated Rego that we've already defined, and also gonna define this templated verifier vulnerability report spec that I have, and this templated notation verifier spec. And yes, it abstracts all that away, but under the hood, it's just doing that. Now, is it our responsibility as Ratify to hide away all of that and make their life easier, or is it is there enough of a use case for that, or do we rely upon more managed experiences that you get in cloud providers to do that for you versus and if you want a more managed experience, then you go to your specific cloud provider. That's another rule of thinking. I think it is. I definitely agree with you that it would be a nice value add if we were to abstract all of this complexity away. My question is that what we should be doing, and is it worth the effort to do that?
If we go to this slide, so if this is because currently we are on this configuration, right? Configuration policy, and we have a simple Rego policy. So if pass-through mode is our feature, that we only verify the reports and provide the results to the Rego policies. So in that case, because
sorry, just to stop, pass-through mode is not our future, right? The Rego, our default is still running through the Rego policy and make the decision, the overall decision in Ratify.
Okay, so this is this one, right?
Yes. This is what we're going to after we deprecate config policy.
If this is the way we want to go, so from gatekeeper side, so from the cloud provider side, they just have a very single constraint template, right? To make the overall decision, but it's follow, as I defined here, it follows because Ratify already have this Rego policy. Here, so Ratify makes the decision and send the decision to the constraint templates.
Yeah.
Sorry to stop. Susan, did we decide on this, that this is going to become, that's the way forward, that the Rego policy provider is going to be the one that's going to be used going forward rather than exposing that to the gatekeeper Rego policy? I thought that was still kind of in discussion.
Okay. We didn't discuss this. So I think one thing we said, we will deprecate config policy, right?
Yes,
config
that was decided.
policy is too basic.
Yes.
And so what's the new default?
Yeah, so it's actually sorry, it's actually not much difference because no matter it is Ratify here, Ratify regular policy, we have our own CRD template, or the gatekeeper constraint template. But the major logic, I mean, from this slide 4, it is on the Ratify. This one is on the gatekeeper. So from user point of view, what do you think, whether it should be Ratify provide this template or the user? I think it will be very difficult for user to write, right? I mean,
Yeah,
for
so
normal users. So
yeah,
no
so
matter
for example, for normal
Yeah.
user, if they're saying we have a spam verifier or the vulnerability vulnerability verifier, we would have a out of the box Ratify regular policy to support verifying, like making an overall decision involving a verify report from the vulnerability verifier.
Yeah,
So in the common scenario, we think the customer wouldn't have to author their own regular policy for the vulnerability report verifier.
yeah. So that means either in this mode, we provide this Ratify regular policy, right? For
Yeah, we'll
users.
provide the regular
It-
policy that most users can to address the common scenario.
Yeah, and also we in this pass-through mode, we provide the similar logic, but in a gatekeeper constraint template format, right? I think it is
Yes.
still Ratify should provide that. Otherwise, it will not work.
Yeah, we'll provide that. It's the same regular policy.
Yeah.
It's free. Why don't we?
Yeah, I think from a regular point of view, if we think the logic is a regular function, so it's just a function in the Ratify CRD format or in a gatekeeper constraint template format, but the function, the core function is the same, right?
Yeah, it's provided. Just to check Akash here.
Yes, yep. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so it will be wired to the default chart, and we'll have, our goal is to have the default regular policy work out of the box with the new verifiers that we're implementing.
Yes. So I think in that case, Ratify should provide that.
Yes. We will.
And by
yes.
and by providing that, we will have a document to describe what is the policy for, right? So
Yes.
that comes to my question. So some policies are for, as you mentioned, for the spawn file, some for the vulnerabilities, right? So it could be different.
So it could be like a simple, I don't know the details. Bin would be more familiar with the regular policy, but I imagine we have like a big template and we say, oh, if the vulnerability verifier is enabled, then also add this additional logic for verification. We may have like a big template instead of different regular policies.
Yeah.
What do you think, Akash?
Yeah,
Or it
I'm
could
not sure
point to,
how-
like, depending on the value of the chart, we can point to separate regular policies. That's also an option, but that's
Yeah.
an implementation detail. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think maybe it's better that we can have a multiple policy, because currently you see I only have one in my proposal. You see the policy configuration, we have a multiple, but here for this one, the second this second alternative, I have a multiple policies. So I know currently we only have one policy, but I mean, if we have one regular policy, if I thinking about it as a one big function, so that function will handle all the logics, right? It could be very complex. It needed to consider signature, spawn, vulnerability, and also some images may have a vulnerability. Some image requires multiple keys. It will be very difficult, very complex. So it's better that we can have a multiple regular policy that user can choose. They can select, I want to apply this image integrity policy. I just kubectl apply it with certain configuration. And I can also apply vulnerability policies, right? So these two policies I apply, then they both work. So customer can choose.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And if we don't support that yet, I think we probably should think about supporting that. What are your thoughts, Susan?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of what E was just saying. Like, for example, if you installed Ratify without vulnerability scanner, right? It's disabled. And then you want to, if you applied a policy that involves vulnerability, reading the result from the vulnerability verifier, you would also, in that case, because it wasn't enabled, the customer would have to go enable the verifier for like the vulnerability verifier, right? You can't just reapply the policy, you'd have to go enable the verifier as well.
Yes.
Yeah, currently user needed to apply verifier, then apply a policy, right? Support this vulnerability.
Yes.
But ideally, user just needed to apply a policy, because if we have a separate policies, let's say, because user applies that policy, we know that it is for vulnerability, then we can, based on the configuration, we know which verifier we should apply, then we apply it accordingly. So
which is
ideally,
back to what I was saying in the previous slide, like we cannot expose the overall like derived policy with the verifier. Like, let's say you had the you have enabled the vulnerability verifier, and then if you applied a policy that disabled the vulnerability verifier, so what we need to do, if we were deriving from the policy, we would have to go delete the vulnerability verifier CR. I think it's not typically something like you wouldn't go delete CRs, like an operator should not do that in the Kubernetes environment.
But if I mean the currently implementation is, if you have the verifier applied, then it will work, right? No matter whether the regular policy check the reports. If it is applied, it works, and then it produces reports, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's another option. We can just enable everything.
Yeah, so even the policy
if you don't use it, you don't use it.
Doesn't care about it. For example, if later we have a multiple policy, user just need to check the spawn and also signature. But if we install the vulnerability report verifier by default, it will generate a report. No matter the policy, regular policy will process it. We will generate a report, right?
Yeah.
Unless user delete this CR.
Yeah.
So actually, that is another question. Yeah, I know that by default we support some verifiers. So after installation, it works. For example, for notation, but in some cases, the user maybe only need a cosign verifier. So that means even user can later they apply the cosign. It works for cosign, but since notation is by default enabled, so it still works in the background, right? It will check whether there is a notary project signature. If not, it will not trigger. But the actually function is already running, right?
Correct. Actually, the cosign verifier and the notation verifier is enabled by default, from what I remember.
Okay, I think we are just on time, right? We can
We're
continue.
out of time. We're over by 30 minutes.
Huh? over by 30 minutes. Sorry.
That's all right. It's a good discussion. It's good to clarify a lot of the slides, and like it's just much faster to discuss in person.
Yeah, thanks. Yi.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, I think as a summary, we should later decide which way to go, right? It is also connected to the scenarios, right? But I heard that we can have maybe a central rego policy. It can be maybe rendered in different format, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand correctly. So then it will not be a big problem. So later we should decide which way is the default behavior, right? But no matter which way, we should provide the
We'll
rego
have default rego policies.
Yeah, for users, and we will consider whether it will be multiple policies. Otherwise, it will be a very complex, big rego policy. And one more thing is about this scoped image. I think we should also consider that. I also did the investigation for other admission controllers. They also have this parameter like image reference that user can specify. So different images could have a different policies. So we should also consider that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I'm not aware. I won't aware that we are already over 30 minutes. Sorry about that.
That's right. Thanks for driving the
problem.
discussion. But yes, I think we have some alignment, like that Ratify will provide default rego policies to read the vulnerability and SBOM verifier reports. And then we will keep this requirement in mind, like how do we scope our policies?
Images.
But at the moment it's doable. It's just not very nice.
Okay, and also one more thing about the configuration, we can continue to discuss that. So ideally, the less configuration user need to do is good for them. It's good experience, right? So we can, if we can automatically detect something, enable something, then we can consider that, so that the user don't need to apply two times or in different places.
Yeah, as discussed, like it depends on what are they modifying, right? And all the like, no matter where you're configuring the policy, you need to specify like what signature that you're validating with, and what is the overall policy. Like you require all the signature to be true or only one signature to be true. So you can have it in one big document, like kernel, or the way Ratify works, like we've broken the same logic just into different components. And our policies are very high level, like you apply to the namespace. Whereas if you were applying the same policy, but specific to images, then you would have like 10 copies of the same policy, just like maybe, like I feel like it's just different customer gestures, but the logic are the same. Like you need to specify your key, you need to specify your overall, how do you make an overall decision? They just exist in different CRs compared to our competitor product.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. We're over time. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for driving the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Akash, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Yeah, same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, bye.